Well, hello, ladies. How are you? We are so happy to have you on Her Opinion Show. Thank you for being here, by the way.
So excited.
Yes.
Finally.
Yes, and it's a
Time
crazy
overdue.
topic today. Crazy, maybe not, but for some,
For us,
cover
I don't
your
think
ears.
we have really covered it this way.
No, I think it's crazy for us. Yeah,
For
you're
us,
right.
yeah.
Okay. Well, anyways, with us today is Amanda and Dr. Viviana.
Hi.
And both of you guys this is not your first rodeo. You've been on a few shows. You've, maybe a whole reality series.
Maybe a few.
Maybe.
Yeah. No, this is
So
part
this is
of the
nothing.
fun,
This
part
is
of the roller
nothing.
coaster.
This is nothing. Yes, and that's how we met. So we met on the nightcap.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
I of course had to have you both on the show. So thank you for being here again.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, of course. But before we get into it, why don't we just kind of do a little background, okay? So Amanda, tell us what you do.
So I am actually a business consultant and strategist,
Okay.
a podcaster myself, author, all the things. You could just tick it down on the list of what I do. But mostly I just help businesses get it done.
And podcast is?
The Pursuit of Badassery.
Oh, I like
I
that.
love that name.
Thank you.
I
like it too. It's
know.
also the title of our books.
I saw that. I was like, I think I need to get
It's a whole
that.
brand. It's a whole thing. Pursuit of Badassery.
Yes.
It's a lifestyle
Yeah.
choice.
Hey, listen, we're all badasses in this
Exactly.
room.
It's a good
Okay?
place to be.
And
Well,
Dr.
and that's
Viviana?
how we met.
Yes.
Because I too am in the pursuit of badassery. And so Amanda has been an amazing business consultant for me.
Wow.
When I was ready
Love
to
that.
finally hand over the reins and say, I got all of this. What do I do
Yeah.
with it?
Yes.
I went to this one and continue to do so. She's an amazing coach. So I'm really glad to have met you. And of course, then we get to do fun stuff like this together.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm a relationship and sex and intimacy expert, and that's what I do on a daily basis. My private practice is Houston Relationship Therapy. My book is The 4 Intimacy Styles. Check out the quiz for free online. My website and socials are all Dr. Viviana, and that's where I really kind of give the information, a lot of which I haven't talked about, but some of the topics that we're talking about today, but I try to do as much as I can online to help everybody who I can't see in person in private practice, but I really love private practice, and I love all the online programs and all of that. So yeah, it's fun for me to talk about. I don't think this is crazy at all.
Well, maybe you're the reason why we feel a little comfortable to talk about it.
Because we're all moms, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like, should I speak this in public?
Everyone's
going
going to be like, what are they going to
I
talk
know.
about?
And we're moms, and we've had sex.
Yeah.
Clearly.
I know. Wait, I
I don't know. Mine was the second coming
But
of Christ.
it's not, that's not the only way you can have a kid, though. We know that.
That's
so
true.
it doesn't mean that you've had
That's
sex.
true.
But
Yes.
we have.
But we have.
But we have. No virgins.
We said it
Definitely
out
not.
loud, and that's the
Oh,
thing.
although I might feel like a virgin again. But it's been a minute. But no. So anyways, and also you were on a show.
Yeah.
Married
so,
at First Sight.
Married at First Sight was my first national television experience. It was so fun. We did Married at First Sight, 9 through 14 were my seasons. I was an expert on the show, a featured intimacy expert. So I was able to help all the couples with the matchmaking piece of it, and then of course guidance throughout the process. If you haven't watched it, you
Watch
should
it.
Oh,
really
yeah.
should.
It's such a
That's
binge
Rachel.
worthy.
Rachel's
Shout out to
how-
Rachel.
So she was on
Rachel.
her show, and then I was like, I have to watch her season
Yeah.
if she's coming on the show, and that's where I saw you.
Yeah.
And then I was like,
The Houston
binge
season
worthy.
was
yes,
the
the
Houston
Houston
Yes,
season.
Houston
Hot
Yeah.
Mess Houston, Hot Mess
Hot
Houston.
Mess.
The cat's
we
out the
did-
bag. Houston's a mess.
I
Yeah,
know.
Married at First Sight and Matchables, which was a really fun season of television. And then now I'm the featured intimacy expert over at Fox 26, so I get to be
Love
there
it.
Yeah.
3 or 4 days a week and on all of
Congratulations
the
on
different
that.
shows. And it's a
Yeah.
lot of fun. And of
Yes.
course, I'm always talking about love and intimacy, but especially sex.
Sex. Okay, so let's
So I
dive
guess
in.
everybody knows what we're going to talk about now.
SEX.
I think we've said it
If
enough.
I've entered the building, that's what we're going
Yes.
to talk about now.
Well, listen, coming from a certain culture, at least, I feel like I was deprived of the information I needed about sex growing up. And just to dive right in there, I feel like I learned on my own somewhat of like what I was supposed to expect, the things I was supposed to know. And, my mom, she didn't know any better. It was what she, had to go through herself of learning on her own. But I mean, sometimes I would feel like, is it only me? Is other girls out there having this struggle? I mean, obviously, I think now when I'm dealing with my kids, I'm a little bit different, more open, talking about it.
And they're more
But-
exposed to it
Yes.
now than we were.
Yeah. Trying to
Like,
help them,
yeah, I
help them
know.
out.
Shockingly
Like-
so sometimes.
Yeah.
How did you feel?
When I was growing up, my father was a physician and my mother was a stay-at-home mom. And
Okay.
I actually feel like I kind of blacked out the entire discussion. I actually came back with my parents years later because I hit puberty at a very young age, and I went back years later. I was like, why didn't you guys ever talk to me about this stuff? Like, I feel so unprepared for sex and intimacy. And they're like, we talk like all the time to you about it. I'm like, I must have completely blacked it out.
I don't remember.
Because it was so uncomfortable because absolutely. Because my father came at it from a very clinical, like, this goes in this hole and this is what these are the STDs because it was the 80s. So like, this is all the STDs you're going to get. Like, and the only thing that's going to happen if you have sex is you're going to either get diseased and die, or you're going to have a baby and like, we're going to disown you. Like, those are really the only things that could happen. Those were like and then my mother was just like, you're right, listen to your father. At least I think that's what she said. I blocked it out. So, but I felt grossly, and I remember sitting in the library with a Dewey Decimal System, like looking up books on anatomy, on like this big honking.
Yeah, teenagers don't know about that now.
like a reference book. Just so I could learn like what's the anatomy. Where goes what goes where?
I think I did that. I think I had to look up what a penis looked like. Can we say that? I mean,
It's
because
your
I
podcast,
was like,
you tell us.
I'm a little nervous.
We're gonna be in trouble if we can't say penis. ladies.
No, so I remember in 5th grade they separated the girls and the boys. Did they do that?
I wasn't allowed to be in the room though because my parents were very much like, you can't be in the room where they have sex
I don't think
ed.
my parents.
That's what my mom said.
I had to sit in the hallway.
Why?
Because they didn't want
Back
the
then
public
you
school
could-
system telling us
Like
What it was.
misinformation.
misinformation. They wanted to control the dialogue around it,
Yeah.
which I totally understand as a parent. Like, you want to control the dialogue, and so I had to sit in the hall for all sex ed, and I was like,
My mom said the same thing.
Really?
They opted out. They said no.
Oh, well, I think my parents didn't understand because they spoke mostly Spanish, so they just signed it. So I was in there, and there was like diagrams and not diagrams, but like pictures of the women anatomy and the men, and I'm just like, ugh.
See, I remember I went to I went to a Catholic school. It was co-ed, and we did get the whole separate things. And I just don't remember really anything of substance that I got from there. I did a lot of research on my own. I was one of those people who was looking very much forward to getting my period. I thought it was so interesting. The whole thing was so built up. The messages that I got from my parents, and I don't get to talk about this much because I'm always being interviewed about what's going on for other people. They were never negative. The only negativity came from, you should not have sex before marriage, but that's only because we don't want you to get pregnant and derail your life.
Right.
It was very much like, we want you to go to school, we want you to have a career. It wasn't religious based and it wasn't shame based. It was like, practically speaking, if you avoid sex then before marriage, then you can kind of avoid getting pregnant before you're ready.
Right.
And that was the number one message. So I just remember thinking, okay, so as long as I don't get pregnant, I'm good.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have all the information.
okay.
'Cause
Yes.
I am a little bit of a control freak, especially when it comes to like my body.
I
and
wouldn't know
you
anything about that.
Yeah. What's
So
really
that was
funny
it.
is that growing up also, I don't know if it was hyped up, but getting my period was something that I was also looking forward to. So much so, and this is kind of embarrassing
I was
and kind of
fearing it.
I was
funny.
terrified when I got mine.
because my mom would always wear big pads. They wouldn't.
And
wear
you wanted
tampons.
one?
And I wanted one, and she would always see that her pads were missing, and I would just be so curious about it.
She was like wearing them on her head.
I didn't know where to wear it. 'cause
She was
I-
cleaning the counter.
I didn't know what to do with it, but they were always missing. I remember she was always telling me, "Why are my pads missing?" But
Were you blaming it on the other siblings? It wasn't me.
Well, I was the baby of the house,
Oh,
so
okay.
nobody knew. But the good thing about it is that she did talk about it, but it was a secret thing. Like, we had to talk about it over here, but it wasn't in detail. I didn't know actually what was going on. So
Yeah, I think my mom did a good job of like not making it a huge deal. And we didn't do like now you're a woman and now let's go have our women's day. We didn't do any of
no.
that.
The period parties they have now.
Yeah, that's
Unbelievable.
that's totally
they
different.
have period
Never-
parties.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have
Yes.
a girl. That's
you don't
why I
remember when
don't
there was
know.
all these
okay.
commercials about that?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, that would never. I can't even imagine discussing it with
Yeah.
parents.
Well,
be like,
I
I'd
think-
like a period party.
I
Maybe
know.
no. There's
I
no
think
way they
that
would
kind of came about because a lot of girls were going through it at a younger age.
Yeah, that's
and,
true.
And so it was like it was just,
Yeah.
and so to make it something that everybody was like, it's a celebration. They create all
Yeah.
these commercials and we're like, and I could see that, but it's like scary at that
Yeah.
age, 9 years old, 10 years old. I don't know how old you were. I don't even remember how
I
old
was
I
12.
I was 13.
I feel like I was
9.
12 or something like that. See,
Were you?
I was
Yeah.
9. I got it before my older sister, and so
my
I had no
gosh.
idea. I didn't know yet. We hadn't had the talk. because I was 9 and my sister
Amanda
was
has
2 years
looked
older.
like this since she was 9.
No, she was 9, right? Young woman.
Actually, I got teased about it a lot because I did develop super early, and it was like, I can't let anybody know, like, I'm a C cup and I'm like 10 years old, and it was like, wow.
Yeah.
So it was really hard, and because I was so young and my older sister hadn't had it yet, my parents didn't even think to have the conversation because why
were
would
you
get
tall?
it?
Right.
Like,
I mean, I was
did
tall,
you look
I
older?
was tallish. I mean,
Yeah,
definitely
I mean,
I
you're
looked
tall
older.
now,
By the
that's why I'm
time I
just-
was 16, I looked like, or like 15, I would look like a full-grown adult.
So
Like,
same, except I used it to my advantage, and I went to all the clubs.
Me too. Cheers to that,
It
girl.
was so fun. And I was mature enough. I will say, I have always been kind of mother hen. I've always been like older than my age as far as like my spirit and stuff. So I would go to clubs with my cousins, and they would never have to worry about me because they knew I was not going to act a fool.
Yeah.
They knew I wasn't going to like overdo it, you know, very often. But it was a lot of fun, and I just never felt like shamed for the body that I had, or I just. But I also was very conscious of it because of the male gaze. Like when you're out and about and you're at that age, and men are looking at you weird, and you're just kind of like, oh, this is odd. I remember not liking that, but I was also used to it because my mom is a knockout, and she was always getting that attention, and she
You
was
would
very
notice,
like, you know, when we'd walk, it was like you look forward or you look them straight in the face. You know, now we would never engage, but. So I was always mindful of that, and that was probably the only negative of being, for me, of being kind of an older look at such a young age. But other than that, it was good. Like, I don't know, I was very fortunate with the messages that I got. They didn't scar me because a lot of people will be like, "How do your parents feel about you being a sex therapist?" And I'm
how
like,
did you get into
my
it,
parents
you know?
are my number one fans. They're like, look, if you're going to be
Awesome.
talking to couples, because I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, you need to talk to these couples about sex because that is so important in a relationship long term. And I'm like, you got it. We're on the same page. So yeah, number one.
And
fans.
my mom doesn't mind. I mean, we talked about that last night, but she doesn't want to talk about it. But I'm okay to talk about it. She's like, I'm fine. I don't want to talk about it. Don't bring me up.
Yeah.
But, you know.
You just brought her up.
Yeah. Well, she's like first, last name. And,
I know.
but, you know, we're going to talk about it. I think it's our generation that is now comfortable with it. We're very much like, listen, ladies, we get coffee, we have drinks, and we're just, you know, throwing it up. It's like,
but it's better
this,
to
that.
hear it in a positive environment than where I would hear it back in the day. And
But
you know,
let's
high
be
school
honest, we
and-
can be raunchy too with our
I mean,
convo.
yes, but I'm just
we can't blame
saying-
it all on the
but
men.
not
not
everywhere.
Not
Not
about,
everywhere,
yes,
yeah.
Not everywhere. It's not like you're bringing out every little. Well, some people do, but you're not bringing out every little tiny
Yeah.
thing about every interaction you have.
Unless you're in
Yeah.
therapy.
They just they tell me
probably heard
everything, and I
about it
ask
all.
for everything because a lot of what's happening in the bedroom or you know on the kitchen table or wherever it is, a lot of people don't know what is okay and what isn't. And so to be able to talk to somebody and look, they have the opportunity to talk about it with their doctors, but their doctors aren't always asking. And or they only get like 10 minutes and they're like, I don't know that I should ask this, or you know, and some doctors don't want to talk about it, frankly, unless it's like a real big problem. They don't want to just, you know, ask. I do get that privilege as a marriage and family therapist and as a certified sex therapist to be able to ask all the details, and people want to share that with me. And
So you can.
I enjoy it. Oh,
Because
yeah.
I wonder
and
what's
I do.
the boundaries. Like if I came in there, okay, it's not the truth. I'm just using this as a hypothetical.
Yeah,
for a
hypothetically.
friend. No, but I'm saying is like if somebody came in and they wanted to know about, you know, what's okay in a marriage, maybe, or how far they can go in a marriage with sex and those things, can you give them feedback? Like, would you tell them like that's not okay?
So I can tell them that there are certain boundaries that you should stay within. You know, if it's consensual, then that's okay. If it's non-consensual, it's not okay. If you feel coerced or forced, chances are there needs to be a lot more conversation, or it just needs to be a no-go kind of place. If it's sane. So if 9 out of 10 people, or 9.5 out of 10 people would say, yeah, that's not a crazy thing. That's not out of the bounds of normalcy. And normalcy not meaning normal, but meaning within the realm of like what's, again, I would say...
Abnormal, I guess.
No, it's not that.
I don't know.
Hard
It's
to
like a
quantify.
school teacher with
But,
the
like,
kid
the
in
word?
trouble.
If people like that is nuts. You should never do that.
Yeah.
if 9 out of 10 people would say that that's nuts, then you probably shouldn't do it. And then safe, like you want to feel safe both emotionally and physically. If it is unsafe, it can be very difficult for you to experience something pleasurable or even the bonding part of it. So it's kind of like, why even go there? What's the point? If you're going to die or be maimed or seriously scarred internally or, emotionally, then no, you shouldn't do that. But like, for instance, there are lots of people couples especially, who are wanting to stay together forever. And my goal for them is to help them to explore in a safe, sane, consensual way. And it doesn't always have to be like rocky road. If you're vanilla, go for French vanilla. Like it doesn't have to be crazy. I did create My Vivid Fantasy to help people do that. And I'll tell you all a little bit more about it if you want to hear about it. But it's a couples kit. An intimate couples kit to help couples who are interested in kind of going a little further, but maybe they don't know how, or they they made it into a toy store, an adult store, but they're like, I don't know what to do, or I don't feel I
don't feel comfortable.
Or I don't even know how to use this, or is this going to hurt me? So it's a small kit, and
they're there to help.
ChatGPT for it.
Well,
everybody's
go to my
website. Go to
walking
myvividfantasy.com or drviviana.com, and all the details are there. But it's my way to say, oh, you want to try something different safely? Great, try this kit.
And how do you feel about people that are in the unsafe territory and that are with somebody who's completely against it? And do you feel like there's a way for them to work it out, or do you think that they're just too different and not going to be able to last?
So I've counseled couples like this where one person is like, hey, I've always been a part of the kink community, or I've always been into BDSM. I want to share that part of my life with you now that you're a part of it. And most of the time people are open to hearing more about it. But how you present it, and I think the truth is a lot of people in the kink community are just really good communicators. So not a lot of them end up having to come to someone like me to talk about it, but those who do, it's because
the kink community. I wonder
maybe they weren't like that before they got into that relationship, and now they're expecting it.
Exactly. It's very new, and they just are wondering, how can we do this, and how can we kind of traverse this bridge without it harming us as a couple?
Yeah.
How do we preserve all the good things while we're trying something that I'm really
into or not
into or very like confused by? And for some
Apprehensive.
people, scared or just really turned off by it. And that's when they come in. And yes, there are ways to work through that, but both parties have to be willing to move towards each other.
I mean,
if that's not the case, then things just don't work out.
It's obviously going to happen. I mean, because some are very conservative, and that is just not. Some people are not willing to break.
So it's not usually about them being conservative or reserved in the bedroom. It's about the fear. It's being fearful of what's going to happen and letting go of control, because a lot of what's going on in BDSM relationships is a transfer of control. And when you do it the right way, it can be extremely pleasurable, super fun, very bonding. It's like, oh my gosh, I felt vulnerable with you in a different way, not just emotionally. And they can really enhance their relationships. But if they're not willing to be vulnerable, both physically or emotionally, that's when talking to a therapist, especially a certified sex therapist, can help you to get through that, because that's probably going to eke out into other parts.
Do you feel like how somebody grew up, about sex, gets them to that problem of being more free, vulnerable and
I can't say no. Of course, that's the case, but usually what I have found out is the type of information and what you're willing to ingest. Like this podcast episode, for some people listening to this, they'd be like, "Wait, what? What is that?" So some people seek out that information, like we were at the library and all of that. But I think for the people who are willing to educate themselves, even just watching a YouTube channel, even just listening to a podcast on it, those are the people that tend to have more full sex lives, because they're willing to hear that there's more than just
one way.
Yeah, I was going to say like
missionary,
like lights off.
Not that
Listen, if it works for two people, then hey.
And here's the thing: we have to remember, they're looking for forever. So when people are like, "Oh, I just like sex this way," but you're talking about for decades, because most people get together and they want to be together forever. That's where it's like, could you imagine eating the same meal every single day forever? At some point, you're like, I want a little variety, and that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Well,
or maybe there's. No, I'm kidding.
No, well, Amanda,
I'm kidding.
So, Dr. Viviana, you're married, and Amanda, you're single.
That's right.
So, Can I ask when was the last time you actually went on a date or maybe had
on a date? Just a week or so ago. So I am dating, but let's be honest, it's often a train wreck.
It is, yeah. I can vouch for that.
It's a bit of a train wreck.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that the person isn't super nice and kind and like all the boxes get checked, etc., so to speak. But it doesn't necessarily turn into what I would need to be a long-term relationship. Or, I think so often now there's situationships, there's relationship material, there's situationship material, and they don't always mesh. And it's
I can vouch
easy.
for that because when my son was 6, it's easier to be in a situationship than a full-on relationship, and you have all these things going on, and it's an excuse a lot of times too, I think, to be like, oh, well, my son's here or there, I can't, now when your kid's grown and they're like, well, what's holding you back? Shoot, I got to go back to
You have an adult.
to the book of excuses.
Yes.
Because it gets harder, I think. I mean, it gets harder to make excuses, I can say.
Yeah.
But you have to, like you said, be vulnerable and open yourself up to dating and then to sex. But if you're first meeting somebody, and let's say when does sex come on the table to understand if you're going to be compatible? Because let's say I'm a person who's conservative and I'm not vulnerable and I'm just whatever kind of girl, and this person is, without me knowing, into this, into that, and then we don't know till 6 months later. You know what I mean? Is there a way to comfortably talk about something like that to where it's like to know before it's too late?
Yeah. I think if you know that there are things that you absolutely feel are integral to having in your sex life, that should be a conversation that happens within like the first 3 months of dating somebody. I don't think it needs to be a first date material sort of thing.
Listen up, guys. You don't need to discuss that.
First date.
First
Some
date.
people do.
Please don't.
No, don't.
And it's the same
Don't do
for
it.
a lot of women that I work with who are like, I want them to know that this is what I'm looking for, and I want this.
Right.
And I'm like
on the
y'all
first
don't
date.
even know if you ever want to talk to each other again. Like, just take it easy. I think sharing that you have a child, I think that is important to have. But at the same time, understanding like, or whether or not you want to have kids, or whether you're planning on moving in the next year, or if you know that you have a parent that's going to be moving in within the next 6 months, like things like that I think are important. But I also think so many people forget that when you're dating someone, as you get closer to them, as y'all grow together, so many things that you thought were not going to be okay become okay. I mean, my husband and I are...
It's true.
We didn't have like a ton of differences, but we did have some real differences in just the way that our personalities are and the way that we used to look at life. And as we've grown together over these past like 17, 18 years, that is something that we look at each other sometimes, we're like, oh my gosh, if we had met each other now, I don't know. Like, or no, it's more like, how are we together now? And we were the same people back then who were very different.
Right.
Because we just, I don't know. It's just,
But y'all grew together instead of growing apart.
Yes. And that's part of
yeah.
the work of being in a relationship, is to make sure that you are growing together and not becoming enmeshed, but growing together. And that includes sexually.
Yeah.
Studies show that people who are in long-term committed relationships, they tend to have the best sex lives. So there's something to that. Those people are putting that effort in to learn each other. It's kind of like training Chat GPT. The more input, the better it gets, right?
Right. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, it's important. It definitely is, because you want it to work in all areas. And a lot of times when that is missing, it's not going to work. I mean, unless you don't like sex,
Or something that you thought was important back then isn't so important now, and vice versa.
Right.
But I feel like it really comes down to communication. I mean, you have to be communicating these things. And no, it doesn't have to be on the first date in the first 20 minutes.
Yes,
please.
let's not do it.
However, please. I speak from experience. However, that's what helps you grow. That's what, if you can't communicate about what is and is not important in the bedroom, you're kind of doomed from the start, because even if you have very similar tendencies, or if you have complete polar opposite desires and wishes in the bedroom, particularly, how will you know what the other person's comfortable with and how far you can go if you're not going to communicate with one another, honestly?
Yeah. They did it for you to impress you and to get you, but they really didn't like doing it. And then it's not me. I'm just saying.
No,
like
that's
I have a
true.
friend
I mean,
that's like
it could be you. No, but it's so important, right?
It is. Well, and I think what a lot of people also don't realize is that, and women, I think we're better at this. I will say that. There are a couple things that men are better at, but when it comes to communication in the bedroom, I think we need to remember as women, like, our bodies do a lot of changing over time. We have been so used to working with our friend the hormones for so long that we're used to feeling different ways based off of our bodies. If we can't communicate that over our lifespan to our partner, how are they going to keep up? How are they going to know? And men are, especially men who love us, really want to know these things so that they can shift their expectations, understand better, feel like they're not working against you. And of course, that ends up working like a team. And in the bedroom, that is also true.